Hey everybody, welcome to A Pop of Culture. I'm your host, the Esoteric and Facetious, or Thief for short. I wanted to make a quick video about Jasmine Crockett and some of the controversy she is experiencing. A Pop of Culture is a video essay podcast where I speak on pop culture, social justice, and human experience from a black, bisexual, millennial, Gen Z perspective. And I wanted to speak on Jasmine Crockett, not necessarily to come at a black woman, but just to have a conversation. I'm trying to post more content and speak my piece, build my brand up. This is a conversation that interested me, so I wanted to speak on it. So, Jasmine Crockett actually ended up endorsing Wesley Bell, who is running in a primary against Cori Bush, who was run out of Congress by APAC, who paid a lot of money to unseat her or to challenge her seat in Congress. To make a long story short, there was a lot of controversy when there was footage showing Jasmine Crockett, who was at a campaign event for Wesley Bell, and she was saying something to the effect of, there is no better candidate than Wesley Bell for this position that Cori Bush is running for. And so the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because I feel like there's a lot of stuff to unpack with this conversation. First off, we're going to talk about Jasmine Crockett. She is a member of the House of Representatives. She recently ran a campaign to be one of the senators for Texas against James Tallarico. She ran in a primary against him. She lost the primary. What I wanted to get to was, speaking of Jasmine Crockett has resonated with a lot of people as a black woman in politics, an educated black woman who has been oppositional to Trump or attempted to be oppositional to Trump. As I mentioned, a lot of people like Jasmine Crockett because they feel like she has fight behind her. And I wanted to speak to that idea of fight in her coming at Donald Trump. Let me make some things clear. For me, I am somebody who is a leftist. I'm somebody who believes that the system that we live under in the United States is a duopoly. There are two corporate owned parties who benefit from the system of late stage capitalism that we exist under. And all of this requires context, which is why I'm trying to add the context. I'm not saying that I won't vote for a Democrat. I am someone who is a member of DSA, which are the Democratic Socialists of America. And so I do believe that you can run progressive candidates through the Democratic Party in certain circumstances who can deliver positive changes like Zohran Mamdani is doing in New York City. I am a leftist who believes that change can be possible within the system in certain circumstances, but I'm also someone who believes that we need to move outside of the Democratic Party, especially black Americans, because black Americans will reliably vote for the Democratic Party without deliverables like reparations or things specifically for black Americans. And I think it's ridiculous that we continue to give our votes to people who don't actually promise us anything other than not being the Republicans. And when I say promise us anything, I mean meaningful change for the working class. I say all that to say, going back to Jasmine Crockett, as someone who is a leftist, as someone who is anti capitalist, I do have to say, for me, I'm kind of sick of Trump bad commentary. And what I mean by Trump bad commentary, I feel like a lot of people get stuck in, oh my gosh, Donald Trump did this thing that's bad, or Donald Trump did that thing that's bad. And I'm not saying that those things aren't bad, but I also think we have to look at the system that enables a Donald Trump. I do think that some of the ineffectiveness of Joe Biden's presidency and the wider economic system his presidency had to exist under, and the donors that funded his election with an expectation of deliverables, led to the dissatisfaction of voters, which led for them to vote for Donald Trump. And I also think there's issues with Kamala Harris not distancing herself from Joe Biden. But my point is, bringing it back to Jasmine Crockett, I think there is a certain section of people, especially black Americans, who love seeing her say that Donald Trump is bad. And I guess for me, my challenge is, while Donald Trump is bad, I do feel like people attributing fighter to Jasmine Crockett. Well, I'm not saying I don't care about what you say in an interview or what you say in a tweet or in a clapback. And I'm not saying you can't clap back. And I do think with politics there is an element of political theater to things. But the point is, I'm not necessarily that moved by the conversation of a fighter because we know that Donald Trump is bad. What is the viable alternative that you're offering, Jasmine Crockett, if you are a member of the Democratic Party who allows insider trading, who is in favor of a genocide? So I think for me, that's always been my sticking point with Jasmine Crockett. And that's also been my sticking point with Kamala Harris. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation, because it's about Jasmine Crockett, but it's also about, I think there can be this tendency in the Black community. For example, I think with Jasmine Crockett, she appeals to people because she represents an educated Black woman who is making moves. And I think that people may want to live vicariously through her. They want to stand her, because I think that a lot of times in politics, there can be this standing of political figures. And so I feel like with Jasmine Crockett, a lot of people see her as this aspirational Black woman who is fighting the system. But I think the challenge of fighting the system, Jasmine Crockett has taken money from corporate donors. She took a lot of money from crypto. And so one of the challenges is, for me, when it comes to being a fighter, it's not just about saying that Donald Trump is bad. And I'm not saying that that's the extent of her activism or her voting record. I'm just saying, as a leftist, there are certain things that resonate with me. Medicare for all, canceling student debt, abortion access. These are things that move the needle for me. Trump bad does not necessarily move the needle for me. And also, I think there's a conversation with Jasmine Crockett of Black faces in high spaces. And for me, I think there are different pieces of the movement. I want to be a person whose actions, whether they be through creating content or whether it be through organizing on the ground, I want my actions to contribute to a movement that takes us further away from colonialism, imperialism, basically everything these people did to create the system in this country as is. Like, for me, my thing is, if Jasmine Crockett's Trump bad isms and clapbacks mobilize a group of people and get them to the polls, then maybe, even if it's not something that moves the needle for me, it's still good. But I do think the challenge I have is, a lot of times I feel like there is crossover between the Yas, Slay, Jasmine Crockett folks and the people who say, none of this would have happened under Kamala, or if Kamala was elected, then we would be at brunch. So I guess for me, my beef with this Jasmine Crockett endorsement situation is, I think there is this friction, liberal versus leftist tension, where there are some Black people where they remember the civil rights movement and us fighting for our rights, people getting dogs sicked on the water hoses and fighting for the Voting Rights Act, and Black Americans having influence in politics. Those things do matter. Like I said, I do believe there is a corporate duopoly where Black people and people in general are pressured to vote blue no matter who, and it doesn't matter how worse the system's getting for regular working class people, we're still supposed to vote blue no matter who. Lesser of two evils. That's always what's pushed onto us. So I think for me, when it comes to Jasmine Crockett, one of the challenges I have is there is a certain type of person where, because they associate Trump and the Republicans with bad, they also associate the Democrats with good. But you also have to consider that Democrats have had power, the trifecta. They've had influence to implement more meaningful changes that would impact working class people, and they've chosen not to do that. Democrats have supported genocide, and they've supported imperialism and conflicts outside of this country. So I think for me, one of the challenges I have is, I think people like Jasmine Crockett and Kamala Harris, who of course are Black women, are women of Black ancestry. I feel like when it comes to Black Americans who are politically engaged, I feel like there is this divide between leftists and liberals. Okay, I'm gonna vote for this Black face in a high place, and I'm not necessarily gonna hold them accountable. There are some people, as long as we have a Black president, it doesn't necessarily matter if they deliver for Black Americans, because some people, they're gonna put Obama's picture in their kitchen next to MLK, and it's a moment, and they're going to do the electric slide and have a good old time just on the pride of what was accomplished. And I'm not saying that Barack Obama's election wasn't an accomplishment. I do think that it's like those wins can be symbolic if he's not implementing changes for Black Americans. And some people may argue that was never his intention, and that's a whole conversation in itself. She appeals to the person who wants to see an educated Black person, who wants to see Black excellence. Like Jasmine Crockett, She appeals to the person who wants to see an educated black person, who wants to see black excellence. She is using some of our AAVE, clapping back at Trump, and she's showing him who's in charge. But I think the problem is there are some people, especially like I said, black liberals, who may see the ceiling at blackface in a high space. They may not be checking in on, okay, what did this black person do outside of we're celebrating that they're in there? After a certain amount of decades of these black people who are in office who may be enriching themselves and giving their family members, like their children, opportunities with their access but not giving back to the community, we have to ask, wait a second, maybe this black person winning doesn't mean that we're all winning. And this is nothing new. I was actually watching a podcast between Brianna Joy Gray of Bad Faith Podcast and I believe Tavis Smiley, who's a radio personality, and they were talking about how Tavis Smiley and other black Americans, they wanted to demand things from Barack Obama to get the black vote. They were dissuaded from it because people wanted that moment. My problem is not people like Jasmine Crockett, educated black women, being visible politically or agitating. But I think the problem is what ends up happening, and that's why a lot of people, myself included, were skeptical of Jasmine Crockett. Number one, Jasmine Crockett, I feel, has not been someone who's been overly pro-Palestine. I mean, there's levels and layers to this. This person can be better than this person. Apex, they were celebrating, rooting for Wesley Bell. If he is someone who is pro-Israel, and Cori Bush is someone who is outspoken and being critical of Israel and the genocide, I think there is this conflict. And I think part of this conflict is, I think that a lot of us have been trained where we're supposed to celebrate the black face in a high place. A problem of that is I personally feel that leftists, including black leftists, have to be a part of a bigger conversation. And that's a bigger conversation. I'll probably get into that more in other videos. But one of the things I'll say when it comes to black people, especially black Americans, is I often will hear black Americans saying, we need to worry about ourselves, we need to worry about our own people and stuff like that, and we need to worry about reparations. But I think one of the challenges is, as people say, number one, you can chew gum and walk at the same time. So you can advocate for other groups, because how can we expect people to show up for us if we're not going to advocate for those other groups? So I do sometimes think some black Americans, we're so busy wanting the symbolic win that we can put on our Instagram story that we're not focused on the wider movement. Jasmine Crockett caused controversy because when she backed a candidate that AIPAC is supportive of, I think it showed a lot of people that her Trump bad-isms, her clapbacks at people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, they may be memeable, they may be funny, but what are the policies this woman stands for? Is she someone who really wants to shake this system up? Or does she want to be one of those career politicians and support other career politicians? If the Democratic Party does not have good intentions for black Americans, what makes Jasmine Crockett different than any other career politician? There can be this movement towards support black women, believe black women, and even with Kamala losing. And I think there's a lot to unpack with that, with Kamala's loss and people saying, oh, it's because she's a woman. And of course, misogyny, misogynoir, that's how I hear people pronouncing it. I feel like those things can coexist. We can acknowledge that there was likely racism and misogyny when it comes to Kamala Harris, even though, of course, she's a biracial woman. I think that we are in a country that devalues black women, but at the same time, black women can be people who carry water for the system, who reinforce the system. And so I think that Jasmine Crockett is a case study, because if Jasmine Crockett is down for black women who are critical of the system, she should be down with Cori Bush. But that points to, okay, if Jasmine Crockett is a member of a corporate duopoly, she's going to back the person who reinforces that duopoly. Here are your reads on the situation. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, follow, share. See you on the next one. Bye-bye.